In part two, I ask how cicadas are faring in Sydney.
In my conversations, I get a lot of people tell me that, there's just no cicadas around anymore. Back in the 70s or 80s, there'd be lots of, you'd hear double drummers and razor grinders right in the heart of Sydney, and what's happening. There's no real sort of easy way to answer that. It's probably a combination of factors. Urbanisation would be the key factor I would put it down to, more so than any. I use the example that a cicada is living underground and then tries to emerge, but it can't because there's a WestConnex built, over it. Things, they just won't emerge, and we won't actually know what the impacts are until we sort of get into the medium long term. Each patch of bush, each vegetation type has its own unique community. You might have one summer where there's a huge emergence in the Blue Mountains, then just down in the Hawkesbury area there's hardly anything, just because of the way the cycles go. The next year it might be just completely reversed. We don't know what effects climate change has on cicadas. Someone actually got in contact with me about a month ago and sent me photos of a red-eyed cicada that had emerged in Springwood. Completely misread the climate, the local conditions, and emerged in the middle of winter. How common that is, I don't know. Whether that's becoming more common as the winters get warmer in particular.
How far do they fly around?
Just how far they go, I don't know. I need a radio tracker to put on them.
Is it the male or female that flies around?
Depends on the species. So the larger ones, the males tend to stay in one area and will chorus, and the females will fly to them. In the smaller species, the males will land somewhere, call a few times, and if they don't get a response from the female, they'll then move.
So how dense and how continuous does the urban tree cover need to be?
Not sure about density. It can come down to just individual trees. So whichever tree that the female lays its eggs on, the nymphs that hatch and free fall to the ground, dig below it, are basically going to be associated with that tree until they emerge. So long as that one tree is alive and still there, then it will have a food source. Females we do know that they are fairly particular with the trees that they will choose to lay eggs on. They do prefer trees that have younger branches, or even just a younger tree in particular, or probably because they're more likely to be alive in the best part of a decade's time. And also the ovipositor, where they how they lay their eggs, you can only pierce into soft wood too, so those really sort of hard, more mature branches are just going to be no good.
If you look closely here, you can see a greengrocer cicada ovipositing onto this small branch. And how are they doing in the city?
Species like black princes and flowery bakers and silver princesses, they've kind of thrived from councils planting callistemons and casuarinas along suburban streets and urban rivers, like the Cooks River and that sort of area. They just seem to thrive on that and adapt on that. So that's why they're still around. Also too, they're species that are quite, or a bit more camouflaged in trees as well. They're quite browny black sort of color. They're not the bright greens of a greengrocer.
And what about the greengrocers?
There just seems to be less and less that are coming up, at least from what I can hear, in the areas. And that's talking to a few other people around the inner west too, whether that's to do with any changes of or urban changes, urbanisation, or the fact that, we see that there's more currawongs around the areas. They're hanging around for longer, and they're really smart birds too. I've seen currawongs that sit on wires in the street around where a male bladder cicada is calling, and because it's so low and such a growl-like call, and they're in these hedges, it's too hard for the bird to be able to see them. But because they're a larger species, they wait for the female to fly in, and then they fly down and pick them both off. Some species, like the larger cicadas, they need these tall eucalypt trees with dense canopies to be able to camouflage successfully.
And what do they need in terms of water?
Beyond the urban areas, we do tend to find more pockets of cicadas around sort of water bodies, so creek lines and rivers, where the trees sort of around those areas have a greater chance of surviving long term and providing habitat and a food source for the cicadas. So.
And in part 3, I ask what cicadas need and what we can do to help them continue to live in the heart of Sydney.